It's good to see everyone out this fine and lovely fall day. It's great to hear songs of praise to God. Hear a man of God invoke our thoughts in prayer. And it's good to be alive. And so, good morning.
Good morning.
I have two questions for you this morning. Number one, anybody here know who the fastest man alive is?
I think so.
Okay, all right. And number two, anybody know how fast he ran in 2009?
Fast enough to beat everybody else.
Like 28 miles an hour or something.
It was 23.37 miles per hour.
That's why they call him Usain Bolt.
And
Lightning.
you got the prize. We don't know what the prize is, but you got it. Usain Bolt, 2009, 23.37 miles per hour in the 100-meter sprint, the fastest recorded speed that any man ever ran. Now, I don't know what the circumstances were, but I want you to try to remember that one occasion in your life when you ran faster than you ever did before. While you're thinking about it, I'll tell you about the fastest time I ran. I don't know how far I ran. I don't know how fast I ran, but it was in the fall of 1992. And I was putting up a for sale sign on a piece of property that had yet to be built on, and I stuck it in the ground in the middle of a yellow jacket nest. And I took off running. I never ran faster than that.
How many times did you get stung?
Too many. I didn't outrun those yellow jackets. I don't know anybody can outrun a yellow jacket. But that was the fastest time for me. So I know everyone has some experience in their life when they ran faster than they ever did before. And Usain Bolt on that day in 2009, 23.37 miles per hour. But I'm here to tell you, he can't hold a candle to the fastest man ever. And I want you to think who that might have been. Because the fastest man ever made Usain Bolt look like he was sitting still. We are preaching through the book of Luke, and our text this morning is taken in chapter 7 of Luke. If you'll turn to Luke 7, verse 1, that's where we're going to begin. And Jesus has just concluded what we now refer to as the Sermon on the Plain. And he's just concluded about the foundation in life is either on rock or it's on sand. Everybody's house is built. And everybody's going to build a house, and everybody's going to build it on sand, or they're going to build it on a rock. And Jesus is telling us all that we need to build on the solid rock. And so now he says in Luke chapter 7, verse 1, after he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now, Capernaum is the fishing village on the northwest coast of the Sea of Galilee, where Peter and John and many of the other disciples lived. It was a fishing village, and that is where Jesus set up sort of a headquarters, as it were, for his ministry, this town of Capernaum. Now, a centurion had a servant who was sick at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. Now, a centurion was a Roman soldier who was in charge of about 100 men. And centurions were, and their cohorts were all over Israel, because Israel, if you recall, is a conquered and occupied nation, much like Germany and Japan were after World War II. Roman soldiers are everywhere to keep the boot of Rome on the people. They're not free. They're a conquered people. And the centurions were there to show the power of Rome so that the people would know that they weren't free and they had to answer to the emperor. And so this centurion was stationed in Capernaum. And he had a servant that was very valuable to him. A very loyal person, apparently, very capable person, and irreplaceable. And he was very concerned that this servant was sick and perhaps ready to die. So when the centurion, verse 3, heard about Jesus, when the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. Now, this might strike us as odd. Here is the commandant of the Roman cohort in Capernaum, the one who has the boot of Rome on the neck of the people, and now he's asking the Jews to help him? What's up with that? And when they came to Jesus, and here's the answer, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy. He is worthy to have you do this for him. For he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. You see, not all enemies are enemies. Sometimes enemies are friends. Sometimes maybe the best friend you might have might technically be your enemy. So it was here. The two qualities of the centurion who is not named is that, number one, he loved the Jewish people. Now, he was a soldier. He was ordered to be the commandant of this 100-man company to keep order in Capernaum. But he loved the people he was occupying. Now, love is one thing, but loving is another. He didn't just like verbalize this. He did something about it. He spent his money and built the synagogue in Capernaum. Quite a test of love. And the people, despite the fact that he was a Roman, despite the fact that he was a Gentile, come to Jesus and say, hey, he's worthy. He loves us and he built our synagogue. Please help him. And Jesus went with them. Okay. He accepts the testimony of these men. He goes with them. And he's headed to help the centurion. And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. He's a Gentile. He knows that Jews are not supposed to come under the roof of a Gentile home. So he doesn't want to cause trouble for Jesus. He's not worthy to have the Messiah in his house, he thinks. Therefore, I do not presume to come to you, but say the word and let my servant be healed. Humility. A man who is in charge of everything in this town humbles himself to Jesus in every possible way. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, said something astounding. If you think it's astounding that a Roman centurion would love the Jewish people and build them a synagogue and humble himself before the Messiah, if you think that's astounding, listen to what Jesus says about him. I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. Whoa. All the chosen people of God here in the nation of Israel haven't found any faith like this man in our own country. A Gentile has more faith than everybody in Israel. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, what did they find? They found the servant well. So what kind of faith did this man exhibit? It's hard to know because we don't know anything about it. We don't know his name. We don't know what happened to him. We don't know anything this one experience. But Jesus wants us to know that this guy's faith is really extraordinary. So let's think for someone as an example that might just exhibit that kind of faith that we could read about, kind of get a clue about what characterizes such great faith. One thing that characterizes such faith is a running faith. A running faith. The kind of faith that causes a person to run to God in the fastest way possible. Sort of like the way you ran back in the day. It's the hottest day of the year in the middle of July, and you hear that dinging sound coming down the street. It's the ice cream man. You take off running. You can't wait to get there to get that Nutty Buddy or that popsicle because it's hot there. And that moment you say, I got to get there, and I got to get there before anybody else because I don't want to wait in a long line. I want to be first. That's the kind of running faith that we want to talk about. So let's turn over to the book of 1 Kings 18, and we're going to see an example of a running faith. And that brings us to the title of our lesson, and that is Elijah beats both. Elijah beats both. He is the fastest man ever to live. And we can prove it. 1 Kings 18, you'll recall that Elijah has had this great confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. They've had this cosmic contest. Who is God Is it Baal or it is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And so Elijah says, we'll have a contest. Prophets of Baal can build an altar, and the people of God can build an altar. And whoever's God burns up their sacrifice will be the God that we will serve. Now, you recall that all day long that the prophets of Baal couldn't get a spark, let alone a fire. Finally came time for Elijah to step up, and he does so, and the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering. This is verse 38. The fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." The emotion here cannot be understated. What Elijah is going to go through is miraculous. I would be hard-pressed to find another human being that went through the kind of trauma that he's about to go through. And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let no one of them escape." And they seized him. And Elijah, this is going to be hard to hear, but it's in the Bible. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there. Elijah slew 450 prophets of Baal. Now, you want to talk about a physical, mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual toll that would be placed on that man to do that kind of work. And yet he did it. Now, you recall that there's been a 3-year drought in Israel because Elijah prayed that there would be no rain, and there has been no rain. And Ahab, the king of Israel, is trying to find a way to have rain come back to the land. And Elijah said to Ahab, the king, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain." So Ahab went up to eat and to drink. And Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel. And he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, "Go up now, look toward the sea." That's the Mediterranean. And he went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." And he said, "Go again 7 times. 7 in the Old Testament is a number that is synonymous with perfection. He went up 7 times. At the 7th time, the servant said, "Behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea." A little tiny dot of a cloud appearing from the Mediterranean. And he said, "Go up to Ahab, prepare your chariot, and go down, lest the rain stop you." Now, chariots were really great weapons of war if you had a highway. If you had a highway. And in the ancient world, in Israel, the highways for the chariots were the dried up creek beds during the times between the early and the latter rains. It was solid, it was flat, and you could go pretty fast. And that's the route that Ahab is going to take between Mount Carmel and to Jezreel, the city. So he says, go up to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down lest the rain stop you. Because when it rained in Israel, it was like we used to say in Oklahoma, it's a gully washer. Because the rains in Oklahoma can come so hard and so fast that the concrete lined channels through Oklahoma City and Tulsa will become a raging torrent within just 5 minutes or so. So it was in ancient Israel. These creek beds are going to be floods with raging, rushing waters. A chariot would be destroyed if it got caught up in that rain. So it was paramount for Ahab to get his chariot to Jezreel as quickly as possible. Prepare your chariot and go down lest the rain stop you. In a little while the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Now listen. Usain Bolt's going to have to sit down. He ain't fast like Elijah. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Usain Bolt ran 100 meters at a pace of 23.37 miles per hour. Now, I want you to think about that. The fastest man ever recorded with Elijah. Now, Elijah has just slain 450 prophets of Baal. And now he's going to outrun Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel. How far is that? Well, I can assure you it's not 100 meters. It's 31 miles from Mount Carmel to Jezreel. Now, how fast did Ahab follow Elijah? You know, you remember, no matter how fast Ahab's going in his chariot, Elijah is outrunning him in front of him all the way to Jezreel, 31 miles. Now, we don't know how fast that chariot was going, but we do know that on the average, a horse at full gallop will be traveling between 25 and 30 miles an hour. And in case you're wondering, the fastest recorded horse gallop is 55 miles an hour. So that means that Elijah was running somewhere between 25 and 55 miles an hour for 31 miles between Mount Carmel and Jezreel. Now that is a faith that took off. That was miraculous. There was no way on earth that anyone could achieve such a thing. And yet, here it is. Elijah beats bolt. 31 miles. Between 25 and 55 miles an hour. That is a faith. That is the kind of faith that this centurion had. A running faith. Yeah, we're all runners, aren't we? We're running to God or running away from God. And so, which way are you running? Which way am I running? And how fast are we going? Are we just taking a stroll and calling it a run? Or are we running like Elijah? And which direction are we headed? Are we running straight to hell? Or are we running straight to God? Make no mistake about it, we are all running right now. We're running to God or we're running to Satan. We're running to heaven or we're running to hell. We're in the race of our life. That's the kind of faith that Jesus saw in the centurion. A faith that ran like Elijah. I hope that you will put your mind in perspective and think for just a moment. Where am I running? And how fast am I going? Because that's the question of our life. We need to have the kind of faith that the eunuch had in Acts chapter 8. Stop the chariot. Here's water. What hinders me to be baptized? We need that kind of faith. We need the kind of faith that Paul and Silas had, that Paul and Barnabas had, that Peter had, that all the apostles had. They ran as fast and as furiously as they could to God. They all died in the process because they knew that on the other side, salvation awaited. In a moment, we're going to sing a song. The song is meant to encourage and to reflect where we are in the race of life. How fast are we going? And more important, to whom are we running? To where are we running? Let's run like Elijah and have the faith like the centurion. Won't you come while we stand and sing to encourage you?